The letter came on a Monday morning, the kind of morning when the sky is too blue for bad news and the coffee feels like it might finally make the day bearable. I tore open the envelope expecting some regular bill, maybe a flyer, maybe even junk mail. Instead, the words inside punched me straight in the gut. Final notice. You owe $80,000 in overdue HOA dues. Failure to pay will result in legal seizure of property. My breath caught as if someone had slammed a door on my chest. $80,000? I wasn't even part of the HOA. My house sat just outside the community lines, deliberately chosen for that reason. I paid my taxes, I fixed my fence, and I had sworn never to bow to the neighborhood tyrants who policed grass lengths and porch paint. Yet here it was, an official-looking paper with a threatening red stamp at the bottom, signed by none other than the HOA president herself, Karen Sterling. Karen was notorious. Heavy-set, loud, with a smirk that made people shrink back at neighborhood meetings. She wielded the title HOA president like a scepter. Her presence alone turned picnics into interrogations, her voice always booming with rules, violations, and penalties. People told me she had once fined a man for leaving his Christmas lights up 3 days past New Year's. Another time she dragged a single mother into court over a swing set that was supposedly 2 feet too tall. Now she had chosen me, maybe because I didn't flinch around her, maybe because I refused to play her game. But this was more than a game, it was an ambush. I stormed down to her office, if you could call it that. A cluttered spare room in the clubhouse, draped with cheap certificates of authority and stacks of thick binders that screamed power trip more than responsibility. Karen sat behind the desk like a judge about to pronounce sentence, her fingers stuffed with rings tapping the wood in slow rhythm. "Ah, Mr. Lane," she said, pretending my name tasted sour. "I trust you received our notice?" "Notice?" I threw the paper on her desk. "This isn't a notice. It's extortion. I don't live under your HOA. My property isn't within your borders, and you know it." Her lips curled upward, a twisted parody of a smile. "The board voted last month to expand the association boundaries. Your property now falls within the jurisdiction. That makes you subject to all past and present dues. $80,000. Payable within 30 days. The room went silent except for the thump of my heartbeat. I looked around at the binders, the folders, the sheer weight of paperwork meant to intimidate. But beneath all of that was rot. "You can't just vote to own what you don't own," I said, my voice low but sharp. "This isn't monopoly. This is my land. You're trespassing on paper, Karen, and you know it." Her face hardened, the smugness giving way to venom. "If you resist," she hissed, "we'll take it to court, and you'll lose. We always win. The judges know better than to challenge us." That line stuck with me not because I believed it, but because it revealed her whole scheme. She thrived on fear. Most people folded before it reached a courtroom. She bet I would too. But fear wasn't new to me. I'd served in the army, stood in places where bullets whistled louder than any HOA president. Karen Sterling wasn't about to break me. The first thing I did when I got home was dig up my property records. Original land grant, survey maps, deeds signed decades before Karen ever set foot in the neighborhood. My land was carved out deliberately outside HOA reach, something I had confirmed with the county when I bought the place. I spread them across my kitchen table like battle plans, and the fury inside me steadied into resolve. She wanted a war? I would give her one. The twist came the next week when my mailbox filled with more letters, not just for me, but for my neighbors. "She's committing fraud, plain and simple." One of the older men, a Vietnam vet named Carl, leaned forward. "She threatened to foreclose on me," he muttered, his hands trembling. "Said she had judges in her pocket." That was the spark. The anger in the room shifted from fear to fire. We made a pact that night. None of us would pay. Instead, we'd fight. I called an attorney I knew from my service days, Renee. Sharp as steel and twice as unyielding. When I explained the situation, she didn't even hesitate. "That's racketeering," she said. "If she's sending fraudulent notices across state lines, we're talking federal crimes. Mail fraud, wire fraud, possibly RICO charges. Don't you worry, I'll enjoy tearing her apart in court." When word got out that we had a lawyer, Karen lost her composure. She stormed onto my property one afternoon, her massive figure wobbling with rage, sweat glistening on her forehead. She carried a wooden clipboard, waving it like a weapon, with past due $80,000 scrawled across it in thick black marker, as if that made it real. "You're poisoning this neighborhood," she screamed, spit flying. "You're riling people up against lawful authority. Pay up or pack up." I didn't flinch. I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Say that again, Karen," I said calmly, angling the camera. "Go ahead. Tell everyone how you forged a boundary and demanded 80 grand from people who don't owe you a dime." Her eyes darted to the phone. For the first time, I saw fear flicker across her face. She turned, stumbling over her words, then waddled back toward her SUV, her clipboard still clutched like a shield. I knew then we had her cornered. The video went viral overnight. Neighbors shared it, friends of friends spread it further, and soon local news reporters were camped outside my driveway asking for statements. The footage of Karen shrieking with that clipboard became a symbol, a meme, a rallying cry. Strangers from across the country commented on how HOAs had bullied them too, how someone finally had the guts to stand up. It wasn't just about $80,000 anymore. It was about dignity. And Karen? She doubled down, calling press conferences where she barked about lawless residents and community standards. But the more she spoke, the more ridiculous she looked. Her arrogance was her undoing. Every word she uttered was fuel for our case. Renee built a file thicker than any binder Karen had ever waved around, and with each page, the fraud became undeniable. At the midpoint of all this, an unexpected twist landed on my doorstep. A former board member, Daniel, quiet, timid, always overshadowed by Karen's booming voice, reached out in secret. He brought with him a folder of emails, spreadsheets, and bank transfers. Karen hadn't just fabricated dues. She had siphoned off tens of thousands from real HOA funds into her personal account, using fake maintenance projects as cover. The HOA itself was her personal piggy bank, and now she was expanding her scheme outside the borders to fill the hole she'd dug. Daniel was terrified but resolute. "She threatened my family," he whispered, his eyes darting like a hunted animal. "But I can't keep quiet anymore." That was the moment everything shifted. With Daniel's evidence, we weren't just defending ourselves, we were going on the offensive. When Renee saw the documents Daniel handed me, her eyes lit up the way a hunter's eyes light up when the prey finally walks into the open field. She flipped through every page carefully, her red pen scratching notes across the margins, her jaw tightening with each new discovery. "This is it," she whispered, almost reverently. "This isn't just a nuisance lawsuit anymore. This is criminal embezzlement, mail fraud, wire fraud. She's toast." And for the first time since the nightmare began, I felt hope surge through me like a rising tide. Karen, of course, didn't sit quietly. The very next day, she sent 2 men to my property. They weren't police, not even security guards, just neighborhood lackeys dressed in black polos with HOA enforcement stitched in bold white letters across the chest. They marched right onto my driveway like they owned it, demanding access to my shed for inspection. My blood boiled. I met them head on, phone in hand, recording everything, and told them flat out they were trespassing. When they refused to leave, I called the sheriff's office. Within 20 minutes, a deputy pulled up, and the look on those men's faces when the officer told them to get lost was priceless. It was all captured on camera and went viral just like the first clip. Karen's empire started cracking. Neighbors who once cowered under her threats began speaking up, filing complaints, and even showing up to the local news station with their own stories of harassment and fake fines. The narrative shifted from one angry man fighting an HOA to an entire community rising up against corruption. But Karen, bloated with her own arrogance, didn't step down. She doubled down, barking at cameras about ungrateful residents and outsiders spreading lies. When the court date finally arrived, the tension was thick enough to choke on. The courthouse steps were packed with neighbors, reporters, and even folks from outside towns who had come just to witness the spectacle. Inside the courtroom, Karen tried to hold herself like a queen, but the sweat rolling down her temples betrayed her. She had hired a slick lawyer who strutted around, tossing words like jurisdiction and authority, as if they were magic spells that could erase the truth. Then Renee stood. Her voice was calm, steady, every word slicing the air with precision. She laid out the deeds, the original surveys, the legal boundaries that proved my property and dozens of others were never under HOA authority. Then she unveiled Daniel's evidence. Bank statements showing Karen siphoning funds into her personal account, emails where she plotted the expansion to cover her theft, and spreadsheets doctored to hide her tracks. The courtroom gasped, reporters' pens flying across notepads. Karen's lawyer tried to object, but Renee buried him under a mountain of facts. And then came the moment that sealed it. The judge, an older man with silver hair and a glare sharp enough to cut glass, leaned forward and said, "Mrs. Sterling, do you understand that what you've done amounts to fraud on a massive scale?" Karen stammered, her face pale, the arrogance finally stripped away. She tried to pivot, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, but the judge wasn't having it. He ordered a full audit of the HOA finances, immediate suspension of Karen's authority, and referred the case to the district attorney's office for criminal prosecution. The crowd outside erupted when the ruling came down. Some people hugged, some cheered, others simply wept with relief. For me, the victory was sweeter than I had imagined. But it wasn't over yet. 2 weeks later, Karen was arrested in full view of her neighbors, led out of her oversized SUV in handcuffs, her face twisted with fury and humiliation. The same woman who once strutted around the neighborhood with her clipboard now hid her face from cameras as deputies marched her into the county jail. The HOA board collapsed soon after. Daniel was appointed interim president, but he promised immediate reforms, transparent elections, financial oversight, and most importantly, respect for boundaries. Several of us formed a community watchdog group to ensure nothing like this ever happened again. And the $80,000 she had demanded from me? Gone. Shredded in court, declared fraudulent and unenforceable. The final twist came when federal investigators picked up the case. Turns out Karen's racket wasn't limited to our neighborhood. She had tried similar schemes in 2 other towns where she once lived, always walking away before anyone could prove it. But this time, thanks to the viral videos and Daniel's courage, her crimes were too big to hide. She faced multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement, and when her trial came, the jury barely needed a day to convict her. On the day she was sentenced, I sat in the back of the courtroom. Karen, thinner now but still clinging to her old air of self-importance, stood before the judge who handed down her fate. 15 years in prison. Gasps filled the room. She tried to shout, to claim conspiracy, but the bailiffs pulled her away. For the first time, she had no clipboard, no fake authority, no army of frightened neighbors to bully. Just cold steel bars waiting for her. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't just relief, it was pride. Pride that we hadn't backed down, that we stood together when fear told us to stay silent. Pride that justice had finally caught up to someone who thought she was untouchable. Now, when I sit on my porch in the evenings, I look out at the neighborhood with a different kind of peace. Kids laugh freely in their yards without Karen threatening fines. Elderly neighbors walk their dogs without fear of citations. And every time I pass the old clubhouse, I remember the night we turned fear into fire, and I know we did the right thing. Karen wanted to crush us with fake dues, with paper threats dressed up as law. Instead, her empire crumbled under the weight of truth. And in that rubble, our community found its voice again. So I'll ask you this. When power tries to bully its way into your life, when arrogance tries to strip away your dignity, do you bow down or do you fight back?